Did you ever snoop through your parents' things as a child and absolutely regret what you found to this day? What was it and did they ever find out? My dad's journal from before I was born. He was so incredibly depressed. He talked about how my older sister cried on her way to kindergarten, and it was the first time he'd been able to relate to her in years. Totally broke my heart. I've never told him though. That was definitely not meant for me to read. Found a letter about a kid my mum gave up for adoption when she was 18. Weird to think my mum had a whole different life before I came along when she was 27. I found my letters to Santa hidden in my parents' socks. I found a riding crop in my parents' wardrobe. I was like, when the fuck did we get a horse? Edit. For everyone saying my dad is hung like a horse, he is. I was unlucky enough to get my mum's dick. I found my uncle's suicide note which revealed a lot of shit about my family I didn't want to know when I was like 11. Found some old nudes of my mom when I was like 11. I didn't realize it was her at first. Man, I have never lost a boner faster. I wasn't snooping, but when I was about 14 I was helping mom do laundry like I usually did on Saturdays when I was a kid. I went to put away my dad's shirts and found a Costco size box of condoms. It was nearly full. On its own that didn't bother me, I knew what sex was and figured my parents did it. The troublesome bit was the following Saturday when I was helping with laundry and saw 3 condoms in the drawer instead of 24. I mean, damn guys, it's been a week. Edit. All the suggestions of swinging and orgies have made me think about my parents' sex lives far more often than I like. So thanks. I'm choosing to go with the balloon animal theory. I was going through my dad's hockey bag. Found his cup. Thought it was a face mask. It wasn't till I saw the horrified look on my parents' face that I realized it's not for your face. Edit 1. A cup is a piece of plastic, vaguely shaped like a penis and testicles would, that fits inside a jockstrap to protect that region from damage. Edit 2. Glad to see other people do it as well. It lessens the shame a bit. After my dad passed away, I searched through the browser history on his computer. Tons of porn and websites for ordering black market Viagra. I didn't personally regret finding it, but I know my mom would have, so I deleted the history and never told her. When I was a kid I looked through my parents' closet while they weren't there and found anal beads. I didn't know what they were, but they were squishy, so I put them in my mouth and chewed them. A bright purple dildo, and that's the last time I went in my father's closet. Edit. It also had a hole in it big enough for a finger, which creeped me out. My parents got divorced when my dad was caught cheating on my mom. After the divorce I went to visit my dad in LA when I was about 13. I decided to snoop through his bin of floppy disks and found a very long story he had typed out during the divorce. In it he describes graphic sexual acts with the new woman. How his life would be easier if my mom was to suddenly drop dead. Specifically that he would fantasize about the police showing up at his door to tell him my mom was killed in a car accident. I also learned how his AOL name that he'd been using for years is actually just an inside joke between him and his now wife about the length of his dick. He still uses that name to this day. He did find out that I saw it, and he explained that at the time of the divorce he was seeing a therapist who told him to write the story. I think it was meant for the therapist to read and gain some insight into what my dad was going through. When I was in middle school, my dad had a box at the top of his bedroom closet filled with hardcore porn on VHS. Later, when my folks weren't home, I watched a bunch of it with my friends. It made me very popular. No regrets. I found typed letters from my dad to my mom in my mom's room. They had been divorced for a couple years at that time, and the letters said some pretty horrible things about her and about how we were being raised. I'm assuming she was keeping them in case she needed them in court. When I was a kid there were no such thing as cell phones and we didn't have magazines, so going to the bathroom was pretty boring. One way I used to entertain myself was by playing with a round piece of rubber that sat in the medicine cabinet. I would poke it, stretch it, spin it on my finger. Wasn't until several years later during sex ed that it suddenly dawned on me that I had been playing with my mother's diaphragm that whole time. Unfortunately, yes. My dad's father was a fighter pilot during WWII. Immediately after the war, he was still flying for the Air Force when he crashed his plane into a mountain and died on his way home from a training mission. My dad had a bunch of artifacts from the wreckage, small things that they could bring off the mountain. It took 2 weeks of searching to find the wreckage and 5 days of hiking up the mountain to get there, which he got after his mom passed away. I was 14. A couple of years later, I wanted to show the artifacts to a friend. Went in my dad's closet to find them, but what I found instead was a 12-inch long, thick, black dildo. I immediately closed the bag it was in and never went looking for the artifacts again. However, a few years later, I was about 20 and dating this guy. My parents were out of town for the weekend, so he was staying over at my house. He thought of himself as a musician and asked if we could record him singing and playing guitar. So, I got out the video recorder and, not wanting to record over anything important, I played the tape that was in it to be sure. It was a homemade sex tape my parents made. I about died. Thankfully I didn't actually see them doing it because it was right at the beginning, still fully clothed, making out on their bed. I noped out of that real quick. Never did record him singing, which is fine cause he sucked. After my dad passed away, I found some letters sent to him from his family that dated 40 years ago requesting him to marry his distant cousin so they can keep the family blood pure. He was 32 and she was 11. Side note, Middle Easterns have this weird thing with marrying underage girls who also are your distant/close cousins. I found other letters from his relatives saying that they are cutting ties from him because he refused to marry and that he is no longer welcomed in the country. They had the power to blacklist him. My dad ran away shortly after the first letter that I mentioned and met my mom, who's Bulgarian, who's also 2 years younger than him, and got married. Honestly, I'm just proud of him. Not as a child, but as an adult. And it's not gonna be NSFW. Just sad. I was spending a few days over to my mom's house in the countryside and she was cleaning up some of her stuff. I stumbled upon a diary that dated back to 1992 when I was barely a year old. I was curious, so I asked her if I could read it. She said yes, but warned me that I might not like what she had written in it at the time. I went ahead and read it anyway, and what I learned was that my father never cared much for me, even back then. He'd still do drugs and smoke pot with me in the next room and let mom pay for everything pertaining to my needs. I brought the diary to my mom and asked her if my father ever loved me at all, her diary still in my hand. She sat me down and confessed that when she was pregnant with me, she knew she wanted to have me, but my father never did. What I regret is having the absolute certainty that one of my parents never did love me. Before, there was always a sliver of hope, but now, I know my father never really loved me. Edit, I never thought so many people would react to my story. Y'all are crazy lovely people. Also, thanks a lot for the gold and silver awards, they are much appreciated. The Joy of Sex book, illustrated. Some of those hand-drawn pictures. Oh no, my poor innocent childhood brain. Me and my brother found a stack of about 50 Playboys in my dad's closet when I was 13. It was awesome for about a year till he discovered we had been messing with them and got rid of them. Then we were all out of porn again, but it was a very educational year. Make sure to like and subscribe. Here are some more videos.